Welcome to Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark. Welcome to Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark.
Hello? Yeah, it just stopped. You try to leave and come right back.
It's delayed.
It's delayed.
That button. See if that don't check you up.
I'm on. Hello, can you hear me? Hello. Mm-hmm. I'll try it and see. Testing 1, 2. Can anyone hear me?
Hello? Are you there, Charles?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I had to reboot my computer. I guess that earlier live that I had done.
Yes, I am.
Hello, Carly. Good to see you. Hello, everybody that's here. So I had to fix that because I could not even hear it on my phone or anything. So I'm glad that everybody's in sync now. So today we got Charles Rogers. He's talking about the false science of Alfred C. Kinsey. They even got affiliated with Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Operation Northwoods, the Georgia Guidestone, Titanic, Jekyll Island, amongst a lot of other things as well. Without further ado, we're going to let Charles explain why he calls the false science of Alfred C. Kinsey. You know, a lot of people swears by Kinsey, and we know better than that. So, hello, Charles.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, the rhetoric that was shared out of the people to me in Murphy, North Carolina, and like Eric Rudolph and Matt McRae and a bunch at the Radio Shack, they would go into the stuff about the Kinsey Institute, and um, I'm having an echo here. Just bear with me. I'm going to try to figure out how to get rid of this echo.
Because it's at YouTube also, and so when you got YouTube on and not muted, the video from YouTube, then it's going to bleed over.
Okay, well, that should work then. Can everybody hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. But what I wanted to do was just give everybody a good layout about the stuff of the 20th century, the plans that was put together on Jekyll Island after the sinking of the Titanic. I think Robert G. Edwards is the name of the author of The Creature of Jekyll Island, where he went in and he did his story on the accounts of what happened on Jekyll Island in the cottage of John Rockefeller's, where anyone that goes to Jekyll Island vacation can go there to the cottage and go in, and there's the plaque in the room that says that is where the Federal Reserve Act and the New World Order was planned out, was there in the cottage of John Rockefeller.
Oh wow!
There's been a lot of recent information that's come out about the sinking of the Titanic and the amount of bankers who was passengers aboard that ship whenever it went down. J.P. Morgan had booked him a cabin, just to come over on. So if he hadn't have booked his trip, a lot of these bankers wouldn't have booked their trips on the Titanic, as if they thought that he wasn't going to be on the ship. So of course, at the last minute, he canceled his plans, claimed that he was sick, but he was on a ship that pulled out the next day on his way over to the United States. And to attend that meeting on Jekyll Island. So there's a lot of history here about the hidden agenda that these bankers had for the United States to pretty much break down the family unit. Is what a lot of people call, the attack on the, atomic family. It's really a attack on the Christian families, people of the Christian faith is what it boils down to. Because as we get further into this, we will see that this is pretty much pushed by what we know as the Mossad. They say the CIA, but it's really the Gridiron Secret Society, the same people who constructed the Georgia Guidestones. And so hopefully this will open up a lot of eyes about what's, to those who are not too keen with this information, can find out this information online as well.
Rick said she don't hear no sound, but I hear sound. Can everybody else hear sound? Please give a 1 if y'all can't hear sound, please. Well, Eric says he has no sound, but he probably needs to get further away from the computer, further away from you, and I think you are probably muted. He probably got you muted on Facebook, YouTube Messenger, or whatever. So he'll need to get further away so there's not going to be an echo. Carlene's got her one so she hears us.
Yeah. That's
Welcome,
fine.
Chris.
I sent it through and it went through his name. So,
Rick says she can hear you now, so that's good.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm trying to think of the name of that one gentleman, and anthropologist. He's done his videos on the Titanic, the Jekyll Island meeting, and just to get the people up to understand and that are not really keen to this information yet, is there was a tribe of Indians that lived on that island that stood around very well 8 foot tall, and they had weaponry that of style of Egyptian weaponry, and they were doing human sacrifices. A lot of the local Indian tribes were very lived in fear of this particular tribe because they were, into cannibalism and stuff that we recognize today as this occult activity that even former members of the CIA are exposing right now, that's tied in with Jeff Epstein, and of course the Eric Rudolph cases, which they're really the same case. A lot of people don't know it yet, but the stuff that's coming out about Jeffrey Epstein is involving the activities before the activities started on Island St. James back in 1998.
I want to show them about the crime per capita over here at Jekyll Island. See, it's rated the crime grades an A plus. If it's green, a C. If it's the medium, basically an F, and it is rated a D minus. So that's pretty bad. Violent crime grade right there. See, over there at Jekyll Island.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tourist destination, but it's really one of the creepiest places in the United States, when it comes to violent crimes of tourists and even some local people. It's just, what can I say? It's Georgia. And, when you're talking about the state of Georgia, you're talking the hotbed of the gridiron. The University of Georgia is the oldest university in the United States. It is older than Harvard and Yale. Harvard is the second oldest university in the United States.
They said Hatewell, Georgia is the worst. See it in the red right here?
Yeah, Hapeville. Well, that's South Atlanta. That's pretty rough territory down there. South Atlanta down toward Jonesboro, at places like it. It's a pretty rough area of Atlanta. Now, back when I was growing up in East Cobb County in the 1980s, East Cobb had the most violent crime when it came to gang and drug activities, simply because of the criminal element running Cobb County, is also as well part of the Gridiron Secret Society.
See the number one crime right there on Jekyll Island. That's the costliest, and that's murder.
Mm-hmm. Well, Georgia's got its history of violence. When you dig into when you really look into it, it's not been a very safe place that I would consider for families. Even up in the North Georgia area.
Yeah, he said the island to the south is not as bad as crime, but I can imagine it's going to be bad all around by this time now,
Well, the crime rate has jumped up in Atlanta significantly. The violent crime rate has. There's like northern Fulton County and places like Alfred, it's an upper middle class area. People have moved in. It's always been a real safe place to live, but in recent years, there's been some shootings in places where they normally didn't have shootings. The county close to it, Gwinnett County, the violent crime has, climbed up there quite a bit. So the metropolitan Atlanta area right now, as we are seeing it, is are
you there?
trying to turn Georgia into a blue state, and it's not settling too well with a lot of people because of its economy. They don't want to see Georgia to become like California. And so, it's that way up in North Carolina as well. There's up in North Carolina, people from Georgia aren't welcome if they're not from up there, because the cost of it drives up the cost of living and the cost of groceries and stuff. And so, it's a big change, significant change than what the people were really used to for the past 20 years. Of course, we know the terrorists, tried to commit the majority of their terrorist attacks around the metropolitan Atlanta area. Doraville really was the city limits that they intended to blow off for the map on March 11th, 1997, if they had completed all 14 terrorist attacks.
Right. And
So,
when we go over here to that Kinsey guy that you wanted to speak about,
well, yes, ma'am, but we
and
want to work our way up to him, our way up to him first, and
okay,
get everybody used to what the what the central bankers planned out there with the Federal Reserve Bank and their New World Order agenda.
right,
Um, and it was, found there on the Georgia Guidestones when they were constructed in the early 1980s, right around the time that the Atlanta child murders were being committed. The people in Elberton, Georgia, um, woke up one day with these big old slabs of granite built in a field there on this old farm, and they thought it might have been some type of memorial or something Christian or something similar to the Ten Commandments until they actually went out there and read to see what was written on them. I forgot how many languages that they were written in,
yeah, it
but
was quite a bit because it says the principles are. Here's what they said right here. It said the Guidestones had a set of 10 principles engraved on them in 8 different languages, including Arabic, English, Hebrew, Hindi, Russian, Spanish, Swahili, and traditional Chinese. It said the principles are this: maintain humanity under 500,000 in perpetual balance with nature. Number 2, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. 3, unite humanity with a living new language. Number 4, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. 5, protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. That's according to their fair laws, not just really fair laws that's fair and just for us, but it's their kind of fair and just, not things that's really fair for us, okay? Number
mhm.
6, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. 7, avoid petty laws and useless officials. 8, balance personal rights with social duties. 9, prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. 10, be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature, leave room for nature. So the guidestones were erected on March 22nd, 1980, but who put them up remains a mystery, making the area one of ongoing interest for conspiracy theories. That's where we go right here. Y'all see how massive it is right here? But yeah, like I said, the number one thing says maintain humanity under 500,000. What is that?
500 million, yeah,
500 million
yes.
people. So if we get over 500 million, it's like start killing our people. Okay, we got to get rid of some people. So that was basically what they had wanted to achieve.
And it was. And uh, when we looked there, um, and how they were able to go in on Christmas Day of 2013, special session with Congress when most members of Congress were at home with their families, selling Christmas. They were able to get their fraudulent Federal Reserve Act passed into Congress, and of course, um, Herbert Hoover he signed the law, signed it into law, and later wrote that he regretted signing the country away to a handful of greedy bankers. Um, I forgot the way that he had put it, but he regretted from the stroke of the pen and signing away the sovereignty of the United States to this handful of elite bankers. And that's pretty much what we got stuck with. We got stuck with an agenda that was planned to transform the what we know is the Judeo-Christian principles of the establishment of this nation, and to break down the family unit. Take God, take prayer out of schools, the Ten Commandments out of the courthouses.
And they pretty much were doing that, yes.
Yeah. Even former Special Agent Cleon Skousen of the FBI, he went in and attended meetings with the American Communist Party there in the 1940s. 1950s, around 1954. And he attended enough of their meetings that he was able to come up with 40 agendas that they had set up and planned in order to cause the United States to collapse from within. And of course, he was a Mormon. He later became police chief for the Utah Police Department. But he wrote that book. I believe it was released in 1959, and it lists out the 40 agendas there in that book that they wanted to accomplish, and we have very well exceeded those 40 agendas, and a lot of people are still amazed that we still have our court system and our government still intact. And it was definitely from an act of God. People can try to say I did this. No, I didn't act alone, and it's humanly impossible for me to accomplish what I did if God didn't have his hand in it. So in 1948, that's when they come along with this pervert by the name of Alfred C. Kinsey. And what Kinsey did to really set this stuff on fire was he started what we know as the sexual revolution. And of course, Rockefellers, they're the ones who, funded his so forth called research.
Yeah, because I got it from a website. I got it on the picture if everybody could see it. Kinsey received research support from the National Research Council and the Rockefeller Foundation, which allowed him to hire research assistants, expand the geographic scope of his work, and found the Institute of Sex Research at Indiana University in 1947. He made every one of his students talk about their sexual liaisons, and that was wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, what he did, most of his research was from, street hustlers or people that had been to prison. Numerous times, some people who have been in the Navy on ships for some time that wound up in prison. So he did most of his interviews with people who had served time in prison. And of course, he came up with this off of the chain figure that 10% of the male population in the United States had, homosexual encounters with people of the same sex, and then he, come up that, that most men had thought about, having homosexuality, and he didn't go out and interview, the the husbands, that were in a marriage with children that had never been to prison. All of his research came from people who had served time in prison, and he come up with this astronomical number of 10% when it might have been maybe 1% or maybe 2% of the male population had engaged in some homosexual activities, um, because it was very unpopular back then. We had what we call the closet homosexuals, the guys that, yeah, they were married and they had their wives and their children, but you know they were in the closet about their sexuality because society would shun them and stuff like that. So this is at the time that homosexuality wasn't really that popular. Well, of course, we know once you get this type of um, so forth research, they called it, and you write books about homosexuality, then they have to go into the pedophilia part of it, and of course, um, he had this confidential pedophile that he referred to as Mr. Green, and he interviewed Mr. Green on numerous of times, and got all this information out of him, and you know,
And of
and
course, it could be a different name, and too, you could even be, like the people that was with a pedophilia ring, doing the pornography, that was Greenhall,
mm-hmm,
they could shorten up a name real easily, you know what I mean?
mm-hmm. Well,
It makes-
um, but
But that's
anyway, they had for a long time. I had heard this in Murphy, North Carolina, out of Rudolph and that bunch up there, that they bragged about it. Um, it was part of that conversation that I had over in the Radio Shack on my oldest brother Bill's birthday. That terrible question was asked because they had brought it up about what my opinion about sexual abuse, and I told them, that it was tragic, for both boys and girls, because the girls had not time to develop, and they sat there and argued. They're like, "Oh, well, that's funny. You say that, science has proven you wrong." The Kinsey Institute out there has determined that a girl at 4 years of age had 23, orgasms in a 24-hour period. So what has happened is a lot of these people that go and get their college degrees, um, um, through these universities, that this is all their science that each university will teach in their curriculum when it comes to sex education, and that's pretty much what they've indoctrinated a lot of the professional class people with, is this type of idiocy. Really, is what it is, because we know some children develop faster than others, sometimes slower than others.
But
But
there ain't no
going
way
by,
excuse me, there's no way though a kid's gonna have that. A kid is still a kid. They're not developed that way to be able to the orgasm and stuff like that. How sickening are they? So that's telling men, and that's even turning more guys on wrongly to the 4-year-old girl. You know what I'm saying?
well, yeah. So so this, this is part of some of these people's ideology that they, picked up in college. You got to remember, they're the ones with the degrees. They're the educated ones. They know better than the people out here that doesn't have these degrees, and the working class who have not been to college, who doesn't have a clue about this fake research that they called research and science that has been pumped out through the universities back since the late 1940s and into the early 1950s, right around the time that Hollywood um, started their controversial movies. And of course, remember the 1950s, the blacklisting of certain actors, from being able to star in movies because of their ties to the Communist Party. So, this is right at the era that they were really kicking it up to break down the unity of the family, to get the mother and housewife, as we would say, out of the kitchen and to the workforce, to where they could tax her wages as well,
You
and
know,
then just put the care and trust of the children's education in the public education system. And we see how they've gone through the past 30, 40 years and have just totally ruined it, as well worse than what it already was whenever we were in high school. Um,
see, see,
it's not
see, this is,
improved, that's for sure.
I want to pay attention to this little article here too, and an earlier news report was saying that he never did anything sexual with kids and stuff like that. How else would they come their experiments, right? Child victim of Kinsey sex research tells story of rape. In Lynchburg, Virginia, after claiming her father was paid by sexologist Alfred C. Kinsey during the 40s to rape her for his research compilation, Esther White's pseudonym is speaking out on how she was a child victim of these sex studies. Kinsey, the Indiana University researcher who is known as the father of the sexual revolution, founded the Kinsey Institute in '53, which claims it works towards advancing sexual health and knowledge worldwide. However, the methods Kinsey used are unethical by any standard, and the data is flawed. Esther was only 7 years old when her father began the illicit sexual experimentation on her, performing different acts with her, timing her reaction with a stopwatch, and even visually recording the entire process and sent to Kinsey. Kinsey had befriended Esther's grandfather in college, who encouraged his son to join in on the experiment. Esther says she witnessed both her father and grandfather personally receiving checks from Kinsey for their sexual acts. She also found a checklist of her father's that listed what he was doing to her, which would be given to Kinsey for research. Although the Kinsey Institute claims the research strategies never involved paying pedophiles, Esther is now asking for a congressional investigation of the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University. Until now, the Kinsey Institute has not provided any disclosure of the research records compiled during the time. However, Table 34 in Kinsey's book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, published in 1948, lists the number of orgasms of children, some as young as two, performed within 24-hour period. Table 34 was the subject of the documentary, The Children of Table 34. Alfred Kinsey and the Kinsey Institute should be held accountable for the massive fraud they perpetrated, said Matthew Staver, founder of Liberty Counsel and dean of Liberty University School of Law. The story of Esther White reveals how she, as a young child, was an unwilling subject of Kinsey's unethical sex research. Kinsey's infamous Table 34 is evidence that many children suffer to satisfy these victims deserve justice. He's got two books out there, and they're still calling him kind of like a god. They're still putting him high on a pedestal, and he did all this. Okay, they're saying that he's the father of the sex revolution, basically. And this is sick. It's twisted. It's diabolical. It helps me even put some more answers into me as far as why my father might have did some of the things he did, because some at the institute when he was in the military was probably possibly teaching him, how to whatever, you know what I'm saying? I don't know, but it makes you
Mhm.
wonder because this is big, and they said different forms, even with the government, with the Georgia Guidestones, every branch of office, there was a leader in charge who went ahead and accepted that about the Georgia Guidestones. Okay,
Mhm. Well, I've
so
read some comments over here from Reap the Whirlwind, said that the people of Elberton are glad, uh, that the eyesore is gone. Well, yeah, when they first constructed those guidestones, and people went out there and read it, they did not like it. It freaked them out, and what it did, it gave a huge awakening in Georgia about this cult. Which is a death cult, and we already know, we've already identified it, being the oldest university in the United States, the oldest secret society, which is the Gridiron Secret Society. And this is the society that J.P. Morgan, John Rockefeller bought into, and they were able to take someone like Alfred, you know, see Kinsey out there in the University of Indiana, to where they could do this so forth called research without binding it back to either Harvard, Yale, or UGA. So, but still, this is the ideology that a lot of our public officials, some of the judges and prosecutors in this country actually believe. Um, this is being, science and research instead of fake science. Um, you know, Kinsey, he was one that believed that, man was created to be with man and woman was created to be with woman, which we all know that is not what the design of humanity is. You have reproduction. You have to be a woman to have babies, and you have to be a man in order um, to provide the fertilizer for the eggs for the women to have the babies. So the whole natural design of humanity was always the unit of the husband and wife, uh, mother and dad of a household. Um, as we know by the the creation in the book of Genesis, it was said Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, nor did it say a Madam for Eve. I mean, it's just they're in the basic concepts that the marriage, the husband and wife, is the ideal and stable situation in comparison to the fake science that these people have been pushing in today's society since the mid 20th century. So these people that are into the child sex trafficking and stuff like that, they think that this is science when it's really is nothing but science, and it was not just to get set up to get the wives out of the kitchens and into the workforce, but it's like in Aaron Russo's 2005 documentary, Freedom to Fascism, where he goes into the Federal Reserve Act, the IRS, and he had become friends with David Rockefeller. And we're talking the same movie producer that made quite a few blockbuster movies, The Rose, Trading Places. And Aaron Russo cared enough about the people of this country to come out with his documentary in 2005 to cover, the part of the Jekyll Island meeting, the Federal Reserve Act, and of course, the fraudulent income tax that the IRS has imposed on the American people's wages, which wages cannot be taxed according to the United States Supreme Court cases. The 13th Amendment did not provide Congress with any more power than what it already had before as far as taxation. But we gave the control of the government over to a handful of central bankers, and that's what we got today. Is we got corporations and these banks running our government and running our court system, and they put their people in place in these positions. And as we can see, just exactly what a lot of them were taught to believe when they were getting their degrees in college is this kind of garbage. Now, there's some people out there that can see through it and trying to fight this country out from under it right now, because as we can see, it has really caused a transition into this nation into a violent and greedy nation where everyone is pretty much out for himself, instead of like it used to be before the 20th century. The people in the community looked out for each other. Well, and this was their whole plan all along, was to divide the American people to where this country would collapse and they could launch their string of terrorist attacks. They could blame it on white supremacy, as we all know that Home Depot tried to have its own corporate headquarters attacked on June 19th, 1997 with a truck bomb, that they could turn around and blame on white supremacy,
It's like
being
they
a
did,
Jewishly owned corporation.
Charles, just like they did right here with the Operation Northwoods. When and here's the main culprit of this. This is a top secret mission called for the U.S. to attack Miami, and this is the main guy that was in charge of it, General Lyman L. Lemnitzer, as Commander in Chief, U.S. European Command and Supreme Allied Commander. It said Operation Northwoods, and anybody could go and download it because it's got a downloadable file there. Okay, who was behind the Operation Northwoods? The architect behind Operation Northwoods is none other than General Lyman Lemnitzer, a highly decorated officer for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time. But let's go back up here, and this is where I made the blunder a minute ago. Whenever I make a mistake, I need to go back and make amends. It was actually here. It said that it says to justify U.S. military intervention in Cuba. Here's Will Keeker. The plan included staging false flag operations, even acts of terrorism on U.S. soil. Yeah, you heard it right. Let's delve into the infamous Operation Northwoods and why it never saw the light of day. Okay, and these were also different people that was going along with it too, and even Kennedy was against it. Okay. It
Well,
says
of
even
course.
McNamara, a former Ford Motor Company executive who became the Pentagon chief, must have felt shocked. He was famous for his analytical approach to defense issues. The situation was highly precarious. It said the target was Cuba, a tiny island nation only 90 miles off the coast of Florida, but a massive thorn in America's side since Fidel Castro had led a communist revolution there in '59. Relations between the United States and Cuba were more than just frosty. they were sub-zero. Operation Northwoods aimed to capitalize on this hostility, fueling the fire for all-out U.S. invasion. And so they were going to do it to the American people, but blame Cuba. The plan sought to manipulate public opinion and provide a real or imagined pretext for toppling Castro and his communist regime. So it's all in the details. It's hard to fathom today, but the lengths to which Operation Northwoods was prepared to go in order to justify an invasion of Cuba were truly staggering. Here's a breakdown of the four main elements of the operation, okay? Imagine U.S. commercial planes lifting off from Miami International Airport and other American runways. CIA operatives or other U.S. personnel pilot these planes, executing a mid flight hijacking while keeping the passengers in the dark. Authorities then report these flights are missing or even destroyed, blaming Cuban militants for the incidents. Okay, that kind of reminds me of 9/11 a little bit, don't it, y'all?
Of
Remember
course.
that famous battle cry, remember the Maine under Operation Northwoods. Planners envisioned something similar happening, only this time the ship would then be deliberately sank, but not before the crew was secretly evacuated. The wreckage would serve as a silent witness, accusing Cuba of an unprovoked attack on American forces. The plan went on as to consider carrying out terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. Locations like Miami, Washington, D.C., and even New York City were potential targets. Bombs will go off in busy marketplaces or train stations, and again, Cuba will be framed as an instigator. A sustained media operation was also in the works. Forged documents implicating Cuba leaders, fake news stories, and even staged incidents involving Cuban defectors were on the table. The aim was to rile up the American public and the international community, fanning the flames of anti-Cuban sentiment. It said, why didn't it work? It's one thing to concoct a plan, but it's entirely different beast to get it approved and put into action. Turns out that was the fate of Operation Northwoods. And I think they went ahead with the 9/11 basically with it because look at the planes, look at the bombing over there at the World Trade Center, right?
Well, you look at what they did with the bombing of the Alfred P. Murray Federal Building, April the 19th, 1995. You know, and they wanted to blame it on homegrown terrorism. They took Eric Rudolph. You know, when I say they did, I did. Um, took Eric Rudolph and made him the guilty party for the attack on Centennial Park, which he did build the explosives, don't get me wrong. But him and his brother Daniel, for example, they were up in the community of Hanging Dog.
Is that in Georgia?
No, that's up there on the border of Tennessee, North Carolina, just north of Murphy. A little west of Murphy, and you go up 64, you go up through Hanging Dog, and there's parts of out there at Ducktown, Tennessee. You take a back road up to Hanging Dog and come down to northern Murphy and knock about 10 miles distance out, driving the 4 lane.
All right.
Because of the way it lays out. But it was still a plan that they were going to stick with in the 1990s. That's why when we look at people like Jeff Epstein, Ed Bentley Jr., Ed being a, federal firearms dealer / manufacturer of the silencers for the U.S. military.
Right.
And him and Epstein, and, they had their deals with various militant groups, Sandinista, Sendero Luminoso, even the Mossad, and supplies Hamas with weaponry. Because if you got Hamas out attacking Israel, Israelis, well, they have to come to their defense. So, it's still the same stuff that they designed there with the Federal Reserve Act to get their Zionist state of Israel established, the whole 9 yards. And as we can see today, that it was the bankers all along, and the Zionist bankers at that wants to control the world. And
Right.
that's why we see these various projects that come out. You know, the Alfred Kinsey Institute was to contribute to its role of breaking up the American family unit. Um, 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 like Aaron Russo said in his interviews there at the end of his documentary "Freedom to Fascism." What David Rockefeller told him, that they were the women's lib movement. They were the ones who financed it and funded it. They're the same ones who funded the abortion industry.
I just now opened up the Kinsey Institute, and just seeing the picture alone makes me sick. Um, it's not my cup of tea. Seeing two ladies cut it up lovingly. Um, Let me show y'all right quick what I was talking about. Right, exploring sexuality, relationships, and well-being. See right here.
Mhm.
That's the main Kinsey Institute. Got this picture. Can
Yes,
you
and
see
these
it?
are the same people here that's finally got to pushing the gender reassessment surgery. Um, for little boys. Convince them that they can change their gender if they want to and become a woman, which we all know better than that. Once you're born a male, you're still a male. You're not going to be able to have children of your own, um, especially naturally. But they always want to break down in science and try to make it happen. And it's still back to the same sick and twisted people that is in charge of this. It's the corporations who are run by the Zionists, BlackRock, Home Depot, Coca-Cola, TBS, um, um, and the list just goes on and on. Just what these oligarchs are trying to do in order, to one day gain control of the entire world. And everyone in all these other countries cannot believe that American people are allowing this, because we are the less leg that the whole world has to depend on for some form of liberty in this world. This country collapse, then that's the last hope for the rest of the world. And then that's when we get our I'm trying to think of the name of the guy that wrote the book 1984, but the modernized Hitler, Stalin style utopias where they disarmed the people and they just gathered the unarmed people up and march them out one day and just execute them and bury them into this one large mass grave.
How about George Orwell?
Yeah, Orwellian is what I was trying to think of the
I just looked
term
it up right quick.
used. The Big Brother thing. Because that's what government wants to be, is Big Brother. When it's ran by the corporations. So that's how our country pretty much got sold out to these sick and twisted Zionist central bankers, because we could see that it all ties in together when we really do our research and we go back into the sinking of the Titanic, the meeting at Jekyll Island, you know, Operations Northwoods, the Atlanta child murders, then the construction of the Georgia Guidestones. Um, and we see why these, DOD contractors and central bankers, they thrive off of war. If you got a war, you got a government contract, you gotta build so many airplanes or so many, you know, so many arms, so many silencers, munitions, tanks, you know, the
And
whole
I'll
nine
tell
yards, and they profit big time from war.
and I'll tell
So
people that that this guy Alfred Kinsey, his father actually was a Christian devout, and he didn't like what his son was doing, so he went against his father, and they basically stopped being father and son years because of that. Alfred Kinsey's ideas, right?
yeah, he wound up apparently rejecting the Protestant. It's his daddy a preacher. I can't remember what denomination, but he's like so many that I've seen um, here from Georgia that just totally rejected their parents and their family and jumped on this, you know, on this, um,
Bandwagon.
yeah, as I say, neoconservative bandwagon in the support of Israel in the name of fighting Zionism. Um, my brother, he said they sat there with Eric Kiss that day after they decided not to execute us because Kiss acted like he supported what they were doing against the abortion industry because he sat there, he played right along. And when he did, they just sat there and they just filled his ears full of all kinds of stuff about how they were fighting the cabal, how they were going to annihilate the Freemasons from the U.S. They were going to kill every member of the Freemasons and all that. And here they were sitting there admitting to being involved in the murders of these children, and that was,
Exactly.
supposedly why they were, fighting the cabal. But yet here they were engaged in these child murder cases, of course, trying to set me up and frame me for the murder of 11-year-old Levi Frady. Um, we have covered that before, and of course, the Centennial Park attack.
So it
Um,
seems, hey Charles, it seems to me when I'm thinking about how he started that by wanting you to start thinking about your kids sexually, sexualizing them, and to being basically you had to tear apart the relationship of the father and daughter that you're supposed to basically be taking care of your child, right? And so he was running that once he started wanting the fathers and these perpetrators to do these sexual acts on their children, right? And so it's
yeah,
like that
that's
was a division with the family by causing that, which ended up progressing even more to where you murdered the children. And I bet that's probably in a long scope of things.
well, yeah. I mean, when you look at people like John Ramsey, and you see exactly, what kind of sick and twisted individual he is. They always like to keep people focused on the homicide of John Benet Ramsey. Like Boulder, Colorado was the only place that the Ramseys owned a home. Well, we know better than that. They had a home in Marietta, one in Buckhead, one in Hiawassee, Georgia, and of course one up there in Michigan.
And
You know,
plus,
the
they
house
had
in Boulder
plans.
was just one of many homes that the Ramseys owned.
plus they had friends right where they stayed with their friends, and sometimes their friends that was out doing this bad things about harming kids, and no one would know that their friends was actually in the home or something like that because, of course, that's John's home. They're not thinking about the friends that's there, or like you said, Roger Dance's place before, and different people's different homes, and so John Ramsey even stayed at some of the other people's homes as well, and like, you remember the time when you were out there where Fred told you he's fixing to introduce you to one of the Atlanta child murderers, and who, lo and behold, who is the person that comes out? But
Yeah, yeah, John Ramsey.
exactly, and then the other person that comes out,
Mike McLaughlin brought Franklin Delano Floyd, who was going by Bill Ramsey.
yeah,
Um,
Frank Delano Floyd was on the run, and so they were hiding him out and using a fake name. John Ramsey actually called him Bill Ramsey.
well, the same thing with Francis Sheldon. They had him going by Frank Torrey. You know, and he was in the United States, and he would still go to these big parties with these politicians, and wanted by the FBI for you know the child pornographic activities that they were conducting over there at the North Fox Island. Um, Brother Paul Summercamp, in their pedophile ring there, you covered the subject of the Boys Farm incident out
Right.
there in Winchester,
Yeah,
Tennessee.
Vermelli.
Yeah, and now they're getting keen on, of course, on what we know as the Franklin cover-up, the Boys Town out there in Franklin, Nebraska.
And there's
Um,
some that I had done, and Facebook went and YouTube went ahead and deleted that part when I was showing them the evidence. That really burnt me up.
well, yeah, because you're still talking, stuff to the first, Bush administration, and the escort services of underage teenage boys paid for with the U.S. credit card. So taxpayers' money was going toward you know, you know, pleasuring the president, and they're in the White House with underage male prostitutes, they call them, child sex trafficking. They're out of the White House. So we can pretty much figure that after the assassination of John F. Kennedy there in 1960
Three.
two
Was it
there,
three?
that was it 63.
Marilyn Monroe died in 62, so I think he died in 63.
Yeah, all of a sudden, you know we couldn't even, Kennedy didn't even want to do any type of exercises or anything in Southeast Asia if he couldn't send U.S. forces, you know, 80 miles off the coast of Florida to a country called Cuba, due to the, the threats, a nuclear threat with Russia. So
Right. And we
once they
also,
got rid of Kennedy, that's when things really started taking a real downhill slide, because Eisenhower warned the American people about the dangers of the military industrial complex that you know, he had feared um, was the greatest threat to the nation than anything, because as we see that it's ran by a handful of Jewish bankers.
remember I told you how, and I showed you the literature, how JF, uh, JFK was over there at where I was born, the year I
Hmm.
was born.
Well, yeah, he was he was president. He was all over the place. And what is amazing being Catholic was how he wanted to go in and, you know, reinstate, you know, gold and silver as legal tender. He had already started minting silver coinage again, um, gold certificates and silver certificates in our currency. Was backed by gold and silver. He started that, and of course, after his death, everything went back to clad. Um, so he was the biggest threat um, to what we call the deep state. He had threatened to break the CIA up into 1,000 pieces,
Wow.
and as we could see, he had went out there to that one country out there in the Mid East and had invited the king and his family to the United States and had um, this big reception and all of that to show that the United States was, supportive of the Mid East out there and wanted peace out there in the Mid East. And that's just not what was in their agenda whenever they wanted to set up the Zionist state of Israel. Because
Right.
as we could see today, even, Jimmy Carter's book, Israel, you know, peace apartheid was an apartheid state. And, a lot of Americans think that San Francisco is the homosexual capital of the world when it's actually Tel Aviv, Israel. Israel has always been a safe haven for Jewish pedophiles that got hit with charges here in the United States and go over there to Israel and seek asylum against being prosecuted in the United States. Is why a lot of people think that Jeffrey Epstein's not dead, but living out there in a settlement somewhere there near Gaza or the West Bank and under heavily guard and all that. When, of course, you got Hunter Biden saying that everybody in Washington knows that he was murdered, except for Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. So, we really don't know what to think. I would find it hard to believe, him being up in the banking and finance and arms dealing, and one of the masterminds behind the terrorist attacks of the 1990s and possibly 9/11 um, has really got a lot of people questioning, not only the integrity of presidents like, George H.W. Bush, President Bill Clinton, President George W. Bush, and of course, Barack Obama. And as we see that, Joe Biden wasn't even mentally capable of holding office for president, and while Obama still ran the country from behind the scenes, all of this stuff is coming out to the head right now.
They call that kind of like an iron curtain.
Yes, it's like it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, pulling back the curtain and exposing the con artist back there for what he truly is.
And
Just
the
a
thing
man
about it
putting on
is,
a show.
if people would just read Obama's book, he's got right there on his book his agenda, and it spells it out in black and white. Because he's going to carry on what his daddy's goal was.
Hmm.
He said it himself in the book.
Yes. Well, everything is done so much in the American people's face that it's unreal. And everyone was so used to turning on CNN, ABC. When we know ABC, Channel 2 Action News in Atlanta, owned by the same people, they ran by the same people, they put out the same narrative, media propaganda. We know that people like Ted Turner
Yeah.
was involved in the Atlanta child murders.
Did you know for a fact that when you went over there trying to save your brother Fred and your cousin was at beach, and all the people that was over there raping those two boys, and they were Ted Turner was there, right?
Yeah, I was able to see Ted. I was able to see Ron Brill. Now, I didn't recognize Ron in 1997 when I met him over there at the Cumberland Mall because he was thinner. He had a mustache. He wore glasses. But I saw Ron down there at the Chattahoochee that night. They had flashlights that they
And I,
had on when the activity was going on with those two boys. They turned on. I couldn't help but see some face. I saw Bernie Marcus's face.
what is your ultimate goal on how we go about trying to get that organization run, or these statewide or citywide that you want people to pass? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think um, every community, every county needs a coalition for children chapter. Um, I almost got snookered into nonprofit organizations before, and I know how they operate, and I know what little bit of money actually goes to the functions, which really isn't a whole lot. They're really padding their pockets with donations, and that only just a small percentage of the money actually goes to the cause, but to a totally independent organization where each county sets up its own charter and be in charge of its own fundraising um, and its own educational programs is the perfect solution when it comes to spreading awareness. North Carolina, my last thing I'm supposed to do in order for these other terrorists in North Carolina peacefully turn themselves in and admit to their crimes is to have a conference for child safety and awareness in the state of North Carolina. And I've accomplished all of my promises to Murphy Building Supply for them to turn themselves in. I did the humanly impossible. I've accomplished all the promises that I told them I would do.
How many
And
of
that's
y'all
the
would
only exception.
how many of y'all would like to end up going over there to the conference when he has a conference on sex trafficking? Johnson's let us know, even people that's going to watch us later on, because he wants to do this in North Carolina, and it should be exposing a lot of them people around that same time. But he's going to make it safe where inside the building, okay? The people inside will be safe, okay?
Yeah, we will set it in a good town, and we will have it to where you know delivery trucks can't get in within so many miles of the place during the conference. Um, I've had an open mind on which town we would pick,
Yeah, we ain't got to say it on here, you know.
yeah, but
I know the perks are always listening.
it's like Alabama over that, bunker ordeal over there with that child sex trafficking over there.
Yeah,
They
the
done
Bibb
made another
County.
arrest over that.
Yeah, there's
And
supposed to be about 15 more people that they're talking about arresting over there in that Bibb County.
hmm yeah, so they're even wanting to call for the death penalty for child rape. Well, we know I've already helped lay the groundwork in Georgia in 2005 in getting the death penalty passed for child rape in Georgia. And I'm hoping that North Carolina is next, because even though the United States Supreme Court has ruled that you cannot put someone to death without capital murder being involved, the people are so fed up with this right now that there's a good chance that the Supreme Court is going to have to reverse that decision and make an exception. Now, don't get me wrong, we only got it for those who assault children less than 10 years of age, and we can thank the Florida Coalition for Child Rights for that, and the South Carolina Coalition for Child Rights, because they're child rights activists. I'm a child protection activist. There is a difference.
You know what? We need to also include this, like the story I did earlier today. It was two correctional officers in with the youth division, juvenile division. And so the guys in there were basically sitting ducks. They're behind cages and they're trapped in there. And they got victimized by two the officers. I think in instances like that, it needs to be the death penalty.
Well, that's
regardless
what
of the
people.
age, regardless of the age. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. Well, that's what a lot of people don't understand about these school teachers, college professors, probation officers, law enforcement. A lot of states, like Georgia, for example, it doesn't matter if the victim is older than the perpetrator. If they're a student, okay, a probationer, a prisoner or inmate in their custody, it doesn't matter if the victim is older than the perpetrator. It's still a felony offense to engage in sexual activities to someone in your custody. So
Right.
that applies to coaches, college professors, campus police. I mean, it applies to everyone. So when we see these cases of these school teachers that are, preying on students, we're starting to see, the share of, housewives and mothers that are, getting busted for it too. It still goes back to this ideology that has been pushed on the people, into the students in the universities, based on this fake science about Alfred C. Kinsey.
And see
And
how that
until we can get past the ludicrous stuff that they have pushed in this country, we know who the enemies are now. They're being named in court as we speak.
yes.
My civil action will be filed this week, and
Woohoo. All right.
I'm really going to, and that's really going to help Mr. Kiss's case, but it's really going to expose these people, which a lot of the people, judges already know who they are.
Right.
And it's, a lot of people are finding out I am who I say I am. I didn't just jump up one day and decide I was going to call myself the appointed governor of North Carolina because I was going to get public attention. We know better than that.
And I
So
think
they're
it's
not going to be able to hide that. And their biggest fear is I'll round every damn one of them up, and they're right. I will.
I think it's kind of funny how you started getting out there about McLaughlin and even exposing him a couple months back or something when he confronted you and Kiss, right? And saying
Mm-hmm.
that he'd like to have you in his thing and that y'all would never ever be able to ever talk again. So that was a death threat if you ask me.
Oh yes, Yes,
And
ma'am.
so with this going on and you exposing that, but they want you to remain silent. I think it's kind of funny because you said that he's no longer the what magistrate?
Yeah, he's no longer a magistrate. They're saying he retired. Well, yeah, I mean, if I was a serial killer about to get caught, I wouldn't want to be sitting there having court when they came in and put the bracelets on me.
Exactly.
I would take an early retirement and get the hell out of Dodge.
Oh yeah.
Um, maybe run to Israel.
Because they even got the records of that case where you got off the school bus and that boy that Mike McLaughlin had ran into that mailbox, right, or something.
Yeah, that was for Sheriff Bill Hudson and George Bentley Sr. It was about that operation over there on Bentley Farms.
Right. And I think
So I've
still
been
think it's
having to
amazing.
deal.
I wish the governments would get over there and really search Bentley Farms right now since they got it sectioned off. I'm hoping the government would go over there and do a good search to see if there are any bodies left on that property.
Well, they've probably had plenty of time to remove the human remains by now,
Yeah, but they would
but
still be able to smell the they can't get rid of
well,
all the
the soul samples would still be able to show signs of human decompensation. Um,
right.
I don't think there's going to be anything that they could do to try to hide that when there's some core samples drilled over there on that place, because it's coming.
Right.
There's too many people from Marietta that has driven out the 120 loop the past few decades and saw how many times barns have caught on fire and got put out by the fire department when some people's homes burn down before the fire department even gets there.
Yeah, and it's kind
Um,
of amazing that every time before that certain barns of theirs burns, that the horses are never in the stable. Okay, that they're actually out in the pasture, even at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Like, riddle me that, Batman, huh?
well, it's, the local people in Marietta, they're putting two together. They already come up with four. They already know what's up with that.
Oh yeah,
And there's a lot of people, in Marietta, believe it or not, that still knows that they were still murdering black children there at the Chattahoochee River even after the arrest of Wayne Williams.
what did you think that he put that black church on the Bentley Farms property?
Well, it's always like I told people, the Klansman with a black church on his farm. Um, you know, um, these people, they like to put up this, this harmless front, like they're trying to help the people of the black community, have them a church over there and all that. And it's just nothing but a smoke screen.
Yeah,
Um,
there was somebody under the Predator report recently. He exposed someone that was high up in something, and he got caught with so much child pornography and stuff. And then there was somebody that went underneath the Predator report and was saying, "Well, this was a good guy. You know, he did so much for different people. Y'all need to just let this slide. Y'all need to just let him go. He's a good guy. He done so much for other people. Like, it don't matter how much you did for people. You harm a kid. You do this other kind of acts. You need to pay for it. I don't care how much." I said, because that's usually a cover up for this them doing these acts. You know, they try to, and was telling us all that we need to just let the person slide because all the good he does to help other people. And I'm like, what?
well, 2 years ago, we was talking about this stuff there over there in the, Traveler Spreads Truth Patriot forum over there on Telegram. And you heard that
Y'all
one
got Telegram.
gentleman.
If y'all got Telegram, and y'all really want to hear that, go to Telegram and you tell the name of that thing again, if you will.
Yeah, the Traveler Spreads Truth Patriot.
Okay, thank you.
But that one guy from Ball Ground, Georgia, he was at that baseball game June 3rd, 1997, when I showed over there and stopped that bombing. And of course, Cherokee County Sheriff's Department did recover explosives from there that was buried in the ground out past first base, out kind of toward the wooded area there. But it would have killed most of the ball players on that field. And the Bentleys, they have interest in a Methodist church there in Ball Ground, Georgia. I was able to find this out from one of my sources that moved to Marietta in, the mid 1980s, and wound up stumbling on a lot of the information that I knew about the Bentley farms. That's why I keep getting allies, from around Marietta and other places, because they can't hide the amount of terrorist attacks that was attempted in 1997 around the metropolitan Atlanta area. There was just too many of them. Crying out loud, you had 5,700 gag orders that was issued on the, let me see, I think it was 25 or 2,700 employees over there at the Lakewood General Motors assembly plant there in Atlanta, where they manufactured the pickup trucks there for a long time. And there was only one truck bomb attempt made on that plant. Is why General Motors didn't immediately shut it down like they did at the Orville plant. They're off of Interstate 285 and Buford Highway, just right down the road from Excess Graphics.
Right.
When it was located there off of Buford Highway. People, when they think of Excess Graphics and John Ramsey, they think of Boulder, Colorado. They don't think of Atlanta, Georgia, and Lockheed Martin and Dobbins Air Force Base right there together in Marietta, Georgia, and him being vice president of Lockheed Martin.
I really think it's really funny how at first some of the first videos I was seeing, how they were explaining how they kept the door unlocked. So because they had an open house and they were really the three different houses in the area having a party, so they kept the doors open, everybody's safe, letting everybody come, whatever, do with the open house and stuff. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, that one lady that was a police officer detective saying, well, they wouldn't send any more police officers, just her. And it's kind of weird how she said that that John went got the body and then brought it up right there and then covered her up with an napkin on the couch, which that's going to tarnish any remains. And then he goes ahead and pulls the masking tape, trying to claim that he's going to do mouth to mouth, and yet I think it was another cover up for his fingerprints already being on the masking tape.
Well, what's sad, what is so sad is, her murder was pre-planned.
Yes, because he already told you that he was going to have her killed on the anniversary of Joe Robinson's death.
That is correct. So he prepared a spot. I spoke with some people in Marietta that was in Boulder when she was murdered, and they were not happy about it at all, to say the least. And they knew what he had done. He had went to the stairway going to the basement, and he prepared this space to lay her body to where it would preserve it, to make it appear that she was murdered at a later time than what she was murdered. To make it look
remember,
like
it's
there
cold.
was an intruder.
It's cold that time of year, especially in Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking some light snow on the ground, down in the basement underneath that stairway. The air was cold. It was like putting her in a little refrigerator or freezer, and they said that there was a little bit more than 2 teaspoons of blood from her head. Well, that tells you right then and there that she was not murdered in her home. She was murdered elsewhere. That the home is not the murder scene. it's just the staging point. The murder scene was at the corner house down the street where the homeless people had taken over, and they wanted the house to use where anyone that wanted to do drugs, smoke marijuana, smoke crack, or whatever they wanted to go do could go down to that corner house and hang out in there and do their drugs instead of trying to sneak around Fleet White's or their home or the other neighbors' homes that were having those parties.
Yeah,
And
they made all the different homeless people leave though, didn't they?
yeah, they booted them out. That's and
But in
just
mind,
in
y'all,
the
this he
nutshell
was
it
not there.
itself,
Put in mind, somebody told him this information. They willingly gave this information to Charles. Okay, he was not there.
Well, yeah, it's funny what people will tell you when they think they're going to kill you.
Yeah,
Um, it's just pretty much, the way to put it. I've been dealing with these people for over 50 years and their child trafficking enterprise over there. You've had your share of dealings with them,
oh yeah,
or you wouldn't have been able to help me remember some of those other barns that I had forgotten about. So
right.
we're on the same page that we're exposing the same people.
Yes, exactly.
And it's like my oldest brother Bill wanted to sit there, and when I told him that the Bentleys were tied in with that bunch up in North Carolina, oh, that's in Paul's. There's no way yeah, because it was Danny Hughes who led Jim Stubbs over to where we were living in 1975. And Danny Hughes, we know, was involved in the Atlanta child murders. In the Patrick Baltazar case, when we take a look at his 2015 mugshot, when he killed my buddy Terry Owenby up there, where Danny worked there as a manager at King's Leathercraft out in the community of Ranger. And so I could still get a warrant on Danny for first-degree murder, even though he's been acquitted of second-degree murder in 2023. It's not double jeopardy. He was only tried for second-degree murder. My testimony will hit him with first-degree. But really, first-degree murder is supposed to be the least of his worries when he's looking at, treason, sedition, domestic terrorism, his involvement in all this mess. I believe he was out there with Eric Rudolph and Joey Davis and that bunch from Murphy out there in Boulder when John Bonet was murdered. I don't think he would have missed it for the world.
But you said that HB had hated the fact about. He said he's for messing with little kids, but he's not for her being murdered, right?
Who's that?
HB.
Yeah. He didn't like what he saw when we talked there in June of '97. They definitely want to try to figure out what to do about me, because I had already put Sam Duncan Jr. in the ICU for 5 days. And they when I stopped that bomb attack over there at the Little League baseball game in Ball Ground, that was about the 19th terrorist attack that I had stopped that year. So they wanted to have a meeting with my brother Fred about me for sure, because they had a problem. They had gone up there and told that bunch, excuse me, they had told that bunch that I had very little training in martial arts. That I wasn't trained for professional kickboxing and stuff like that, and that I was full of it, and this, that, and the other. And I was actually drafted by the YMCA right there at Sprayberry Crossing in East Cobb back in 1986. And I was the only guy that went the full 4 rounds with a third-degree black belt by the name of Mike Stahl that was from West Palm Beach, Florida, that moved up to Marietta and graduated from Spray Valley High School the year before that. So I was in framing homes back then, and right when I got off work, I was putting gloves and feet pads in there, you know, going full, 4 4-minute rounds, full body contact and kickboxing. And then I was training the same way. I'd be out, framing houses all day. And within an hour of getting off work, I was already in training for fighting.
Oh,
And that was whenever I did get rested up and was put in a ring. If I trained when I was tired, I would be hell on wheels when rested up and put in the ring for a professional fight.
right.
So they had a problem up in Murphy once I got up there. It's like I had to tell people before, if you're going to stop 30 terrorist attacks, you're going to whoop a lot of ass. And that's what wound up happening. But the beautiful thing is, some of these people that are involved in some of their drug operations and gambling and stuff like that, there are other elements of organized crime, are not keen on this child sex trafficking stuff or this
Yeah.
ritual abuse and child sacrifice that these people are into.
Yeah, they don't know.
They don't know. I mean, I have never had any reason to suspect that my dad's, first half cousin, Billy Wayne Davis, who was a hitman for the Dixie Mob, was involved in any of this mess with the Bentleys. But I know dang good and well my cousin Robert Beach was, my brother Fred Rogers was. And of course, Robert was, and Ed was involved with Jeff Epstein in the international arms trade, to these various militant groups abroad and militia groups here in the United States. They were supplying, Fred was a member of the Midwestern Bank Bandits, Aryan Republican Army. He was a bank robber.
And we also know that Eric Rudolph was John Bonet's ski instructor. So all these different girls who was up there that he was teaching how to water ski, a lot of times he delivered them to Epstein.
Well, not only that, Ghislaine was their chaperone, and she procured them, and to where Rudolph could have his way with them when she was highly trusted chaperone, recommended by Zell Miller, and John Ramsey of all people. We know that Zell Miller, who was governor of the state of Georgia at the time, was real good friends with John and Patsy Ramsey. He came out when he was a U.S. Senator in 2005 and stated it. Now, we all know that Eric Rudolph worked for him over there at the Brasstown Valley Golf Club, which, of course, Eric also did work, for customers through Murphy Build and Supply. He also did some work for Dunkin' Oil. He did, remodeled Jimmy and Rosalind Carter's house down in Plains, Georgia back in '94. He did some work for David Ralston, who was Speaker of the Georgia General Assembly for a while. He was, even though he shows his degrees coming from Samford University, was educated there in Young Harris, Georgia, part of the University of Georgia system. So he was a gridiron.
Oh, boy.
So,
big this organization are.
that picture, of John Bonet and her little white, beautiful dress and bonnet, that was taken in Helen, Georgia during Oktoberfest of 1996 when Ghislaine Maxwell was on a date with her boyfriend, Eric Rudolph.
Yeah, so people need to know that Lee.
But here's the historical basis that'll give the listeners something to spread word to the families for, and looking at the reap the whirlwind again, because and don't forget how they, push the theory of evolution in schools. The theory is 100 years old, and I agree. The Big Bang Theory and all of that has already been disproved by forensic science.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly.
you can take an atheist, get them a degree in forensic science working with DNA, and when they get over to get working with DNA, next thing you know, they're a Christian. That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
Because they'll sit there and they'll tell you DNA, it's impossible for DNA to occur just from this big old blast. It was created. So we are part of the creation.
Then how come there's still tadpoles out there if we were descended up of from all the way from frogs and whatever, tadpoles, frogs, and all that kind of stuff? It really don't make sense.
Well, that's like a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. It's by
Yeah,
design. But it
that's
just
by
didn't happen.
design, but
It just didn't happen like that because of some huge big bang in the universe, and all of a sudden here's life. I mean, it doesn't work that
we
way.
didn't come from tadpoles, okay, but frogs did, okay. So they want to say that we actually first came from a little thing, and then we ended up frogs, and then we started legs and started, and then we ended up into apes, and then we ended up, get real, people.
Yeah. Well, that's like Joan Ossoff. This guy, he's Jewish. He's from Georgia. He's a Democrat. You know, um, 2 years ago, he released his findings against Child Protective Services and the amount of missing children through Child Protective Services. He's Jewish, and he's totally opposed to partnership or sponsoring, the Zionist state of Israel. So you got Jewish Americans that are 100% opposed to what is happening out there in Gaza and what happened in the West Bank. People, it's like, Operation Northwoods. People are starting to find out the plot in the 1960s. Now they're going to see that was also a plot of the 1990s. That they was going to try this stuff again with those series of terrorist attacks, and they were going to pin it on these various militia groups and other ethnic groups, and these different attacks and stuff like that. Well, it just didn't go the way they planned because one, God wasn't going to allow it.
Right.
He created he created the family. He didn't create the men to be homosexuals, pedophiles, or chomos, or child murderers. That is totally against the unique design of the creation of humanity.
He's mad when somebody comes and splits up marriages too, because when God puts two people together, no man put,
Yes. And now we got to see a lot of these young men that had that surgery supposed to turn them into a female, and they weren't told that the medication that they was going to have to be on for the rest of their lives would cost them about $30,000 a year. And
like
the
there was
medication has been cut off, and here they were, out here and took the hormones and all that stuff. They were groomed. That is a crime in itself.
I know somebody that
Taking
took
these
the
young
hormones.
boys, even younger than kindergarten, and trying to convince them, well, you could become a little girl now. You could, you can grow up and be a woman, and
Charles, Charles, like when that person was hurt so much by his wife and everything, per se, and all of a sudden, he wanted to change. I guess they were lying to him up in upstate New York, and this was before 1999. And so he was starting already taking these hormone treatments and growing boobs, and they said he could be a woman if he wanted to. He wasn't ever gonna be a woman just because he, had that grew boobs because he ain't gonna have the genitalia. Okay, he's not gonna have the ovaries. He's not gonna have the other things, right? So when he decided that he made a mistake, and so he wanted to go back to being a man, he could never act as a man ever again because it messed up his manhood because of that. The hormones messed him up the rest of his life.
well, yeah, some of these guys that decided to have the surgery after they were 18 years old. I was watching a documentary over a year ago, and their parents were totally supportive of it.
You see that right there?
And they went through with the surgery, and they came to that point in life to where they just wanted a normal life. They wanted to have a wife. So some of them went and had some skin sewed on down there that really has no function at all whatsoever, but better than nothing. So when they go out with their wives, they look normal.
What
But
I really,
these men, the ones that come out of that, they regret having those surgeries, and they were adults when they had those surgeries,
right.
and they were still naive to the ramifications of having that surgery.
Yeah, you can be anything you want to. We got science now, be able to do that. You'll be able to one day be able to have a boy. The first time I heard that the first male that had a baby, I said, "Show me, prove to me," right?
Yeah, and it
And
turned
it
out to
never
be a
proved nothing
woman.
to me because it was a woman. It's had a woman's parts, but it's taken that, going to have a male hormones, kind of grown the beard and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but still could have babies. Now it's supposed to be a man, but it's not a man. It was born a woman. It was born female.
Exactly. So a woman, still had the ovaries. And then his lover that was born a man that wanted to be a woman. So well, one day I'll be able to have kids. And I said, you don't have, uterus, you don't have ways, the natural stuff that your body. And as you're aging, your body starts preparing for a lot of stuff, like teenhood, adulthood. There's menstruation. There's different things that leads up to get a person. So you just can't just go hung ho and be like that if you're not a man. One thing
Mm-hmm.
that really upset me is when they had the spokesperson for tampons,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really a guy, and it tried to sell tampons. These really work for me. Oh, really? You ain't never had a menstrual cycle, so how can you really say that these really work for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's you know, um, a lot of people are waking up. It's like over
You see,
here,
you see what
Richard
Reed
Warren has
said.
said, Yarden, Silvera, Griffin, Sefit Liam, Johns, deceased from gender reassessment surgery. The ones that ain't dying, the ones that are, is because they can't afford the medication. It's like giving a person phenobarbital after so long and take them off and make them quit cold turkey. If they survive that, it's they're a walking miracle. The ones that aren't dying because of it, they're committing suicide.
A lot of people
Uh,
said, I hate it when they go and, you remember there's one kid that was at preschool, right?
mhm.
And he went to school upset because he said that they can't, uh, he said, my parents won't let me be a girl and I want to be a girl. So what did they do? You know, he didn't get to go home that afternoon because CBS took him. How dare you
Well,
not let your child be a woman, girl, if he wants to be a girl? But kids will do role play and stuff like that, and they don't know what they're saying when they say that.
well, that's like whenever I was, for 3 years, from the time I was 3 years old to the time I was 6 years old. I want to be a little girl because my sister was getting more presents for Christmas.
Right. So that
Now,
don't
when
mean
I
you
went
really want
in
to
with
be a
double
little girl.
pneumonia, when I went in for double pneumonia, in '72, and had that near-death experience, when I came back, it was totally out of the question. I didn't care about Christmas presents anymore. I didn't care about any of that. I was a boy and I was going to grow up to be a man. So I think my story is pretty unique for these children out here that they, want to push this, rhetoric on. And, it's like those parents up there that had me talking with their children there in September of 1999.
The ice cream.
After hear me have that conversation with that little 5-year-old girl up there and gave her a pretty good rundown, I always looked at it. If I'm going to give a child advice, I'm going to give them the same advice that I would have liked to hear out of an adult when I was that age, and that's what I did. And next thing I know, I'm out here having to talk to a group of 20-something children because their parents wanted me to give them the rundown that I did that one little 5-year-old girl. And then, of course, when I did that, well, 3 of the water skiing students of Eric Rudolph their parents wanted them to meet with me and talk to me and tell me about their experiences with him, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeff Epstein. And um, and it's like, it's like I told them, that youngest one, she was 12 when I interviewed her. So she wasn't even quite 10 years of age, just cute as a butt and a little old petite blue-eye blonde. And I could not imagine why someone close to my age, and here I was in my early 30s when I interviewed this girl.
Uh-huh.
And it's like I told her, I was like, well, shoot, if I was up there, Deep Creek in Price City, and you were standing there looking at the waterfall, and I was sitting there, I would have a little friendly conversation about how you doing and this, that, and the other. I couldn't imagine, having anything beyond a conversation than that. And she was like, well, yeah, that's the way I'd like to think too. I would hate to think that someone, your age or close to your age would want to have a conversation with me about anything but that. So we were on the same page there. But it was the same thing to her. I told us, like, well, there's going to come a time when you get older, people are going to try to lure you with drugs. They're going to try to pull you away from your education. You need to proceed in focusing on education, figure out something that you want to do when you go to college, or if you want to be a mother, a housewife. Don't let anyone out here ever deter you away from that.
Very good
And
advice.
but they had Jen, the oldest one, the figure skater. Of course, her mother was from Nantahala, North Carolina, but her dad was from Milton, Georgia, Atlanta, and she lived mostly in Atlanta during the school year, and she'd go up there to North Carolina during the summer. She's the one that I saw Jeff Epstein having lunch with the day after the attack on Centennial Park at the Huddle House there in Blairsville.
Oh boy.
And
She
she
dressed
was,
up she dressed up about like a hooker that day. It's totally different than what you've seen her before, right?
Well, yeah, she was supposed to be taking her water skiing lessons over there in Lake Chattooga by Eric Rudolph that day. She went, as in her words, being dressed up as a prostitute, having lunch with a 48-year-old creep.
Right.
Which was Jeff Epps. That's the way she looked at him. She made $100 just to go have lunch with him. Ghislaine picked out the outfit and the blonde wig and all that. The first time I met with her, she was in her natural state, brunette, and blue jeans and a blouse. Second time I interviewed her, they come up and told me there was another girl that wanted to meet with me that Rudolph had, assaulted, that was a water skiing student of his. Well, it was her dressed up in the same outfit that she was dressed up in when I saw her in the Huddle House having lunch with Epstein.
Wow.
And her parents wanted her to dress up like that. That way I would have recognized that she was the same girl that I saw in the Huddle House with him.
Right.
And they had a fit when they found out that way she was dressed up and was over with this 49-year-old creep. They wasn't certain how old he was at that time. But it was Jeff Epstein. That was really the first time I could recall ever seeing him in person. The second time I saw him was actually in 2005 after I got back from Birmingham, when Eric Rudolph entered that deal out there to come back to Atlanta and plead guilty to the charges there. So I saw Epstein and Les Wexner down there close to 5 Points in Atlanta before I met with Bobby Kennedy Jr. So that was actually the second time I'd seen Les Wexner, because he was down at the Chattahoochee that night back in 1982.
So when did you see Robert Kennedy Jr.?
In Atlanta.
So did you ever get the chance to ever speak with him again?
Not since then. I got to meet with Elon Musk back in 2013 during the construction of the Avalon over in Alpharetta, Georgia.
Yeah, he saved your life, sort of.
Yeah, he saved my life after that meeting. But, I think he's like a lot of people, didn't like what they said. They couldn't say nothing without fear for their own safety. In his case, citizenship, a lot at stake. So you have to consider their position, when you look at this mess, because you just don't know who was really forced into it and who just, jumped into it all on their own. It's just, it's that mind boggling. But,
yeah.
We all have a free will. I don't know how I would react if I was to, show up and they were murdering a child or torturing a child. I don't know what I would do. I'd probably wind up seeing how many of them I could take out before they killed me, because I think I would much rather die than engage in something like that. But, again, these people, threatened, murdered my entire family. They did attempt to murder my mother back in June of 2000. We know they tried to kill me numerous times.
I hate to ask you, but it's been over 2 hours, so I don't know.
Yeah, but I hope this helps. I hope this helps people get a little bit more knowledge that didn't know about this stuff. This hopefully this will give y'all a pretty good idea of what we're up against.
Yes, and please quit blaming Bert.
Yeah, leave Bert Ramsey alone. If you want to point fingers of any of the Ramsey's children, just look at John Andrew. I still want to flip a quarter about which one can outrun who. Big Bird Craig Manier or John Andrews, because they both can run pretty fast. They they really can. Um,
Yeah, Home
I
Depot,
mean,
dude. Didn't you got him?
well,
Wanted me to.
Big Bird looks like he might could stand a chance of taking care of himself by himself than what John Andrew ever could do.
Yeah, I think I need
Um,
to get that picture up right quick so people would understand what we're laughing about. So give me a few minutes, okay?
yeah, I also put one up about Lacey Frady, Levi Frady's twin sister, because I always said if it came to a picture perfect couple, Burt Ramsey and Lacey Frady would be the ideal match, because you look at Burke's kind of this nice looking young man. They're only about a year, maybe two difference in age.
I hope
Both
I
parents
got a
were
picture of her
involved in
because
the homicides of their siblings. Okay, so they have that in common.
I,
Okay. Marilyn Parkman. I've told you what she told me when I interviewed her in September of '99. I interviewed, Albert Samples, Tommy Albert Samples, before I interviewed Marilyn Parkman.
yeah,
Um,
I might not have her picture. I don't know.
yeah, well, she wrote a book about her son's murder, but nobody bought a copy, especially the people in Cumming. Nobody wanted it. They didn't even want to waste their money. But
Can y'all see the picture? Craig Manier right here with him.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I kind of think they could be the same individual looking at the hairstyle there. Anyway,
Oh boy.
but yeah, Craig Manier,
Yeah, Carlene said, "Yep."
he, Craig told me, ladies and gentlemen, this was around July the 7th of 2001, before I escaped my brother Fred's automobile, that he was the one who picked the date to murder John Bonet because he's a distant cousin to Jill Robinson. Okay, and he's also the one that claimed to be in control of the garrote that was found on John Bonet after her homicide.
So
Now,
the
Craig was also involved in the October 22nd, 1997 abduction of Levi Frady. Okay. He was with Danny Hughes, Milton Frady, Levi's daddy, Danny Hughes, and Doug McRae from Murphy, North Carolina. Marilyn Parkman described him. Albert Samples described him. They didn't know him by name. Jim Vickers, the branch manager of Electrolux in Gainesville, Georgia, described him in 1997. So when I got in the automobile with Fred that day, and they wound up, him and Roger Nance picked him up, and one of the first things I said to him, I said, "You're one of the guys that helped abduct Levi Frady," and he was shocked when I told him that, and that's when he started giving me the admissions to his role in the homicide of John Benet Ramsey.
It's a shame what they did to Levi.
Mm-hmm. But the funny thing is, some of the guys that they had hired to watch me there at Piedmont Hospital after I escaped and got back to the hospital, my dad was dying in the ICU when this happened. And so, I had extra change of clothes. So I was able to go back and, clean up and put on some clean clothes. But believe it or not, two of the guys that they hired to monitor my activities that day was actually working in a convenience store. They're on Buford Highway in Doraville and Chambly. Yeah, on the corner. I think Chambly and Dunwoody Road. There's that little convenience store there that's got the little retail space next, the same building with it, and that's where they were remodeling. When they set out those backpacks of explosives over there, they put out a backpack of explosives out there at the dumpster at that convenience store where they were working at. And if that had been detonated, it could have killed their whole crew. Well, that's who they hired to watch me at Piedmont Hospital. Was two of those guys. So when I had my confrontation with them there in the lobby, when they all decided to come in and get them something to drink and all that, I had my little confrontation there with them. And this old boy, called Cowboy because he was dressed up in a corduroy sport coat, blue jeans, Western boots, cowboy hat, So when I told them that, their buddy Craig, I didn't know what his last name was, old Craig Manier, I was like, yeah. It's my understanding was also involved in the murder of John Bonet. Old Cowboy goes, oh, really? Well, who told you that? I said, well, he did yesterday. So he said he was going to go have a talk with Craig. And I said, well, do me a favor while you're at it. And tell him I said he ain't got a hair on his butt if he don't come over here and fight me one-on-one. And they thought that's cute because Craig, he's like 6'3", around 270 pounds, solid muscle. He's a big guy. And they just thought that was so cute. But when he did come over there and show up around 3:30 that afternoon, he did the same thing that they hired that wrestler to do up there in Murphy, North Carolina there in 1999, come out there like he was going to fight me, dressed up like a biker, big old boy, about 6'3", 6'4", rough looking character. I was kind of scared when I went running toward him. He was so big, but he took off running. Well, Craig, he did the same thing. When he sat there and pulled off his shirt, his eyes odd shirt, and tell me come over there, he would beat my little weasel butt all over the place. Well, when I started charging toward him, he took off running. So that's where he earned the nickname Big Bird. And that nickname, well, the nickname stuck with him because all the elite in Atlanta found out how he took off running. And everybody in Atlanta was giving him cane over that. And so you went running away from a little old Charles Rogers. I mean, they gave him hell over it. So every time it's like every time I ever see John Ramsey out in public, I'll look at John. Oh, it's that guy that got his butt whooped by that 11-year-old blonde that time. I did the same thing. Craig Manier, every time I see him, I'm like, hey, Big Bird. So that's where Craig earned the nickname Big Bird.
Yeah, he just goes like this and say, oh, she wouldn't keep my butt if I would have removed her tennis shoes, but I didn't forgot to remove her tennis shoes, so that's why she beat my butt.
Well, he didn't think she beat his butt. She just got advantage and got away. But I had to tell him. I was like, well, Mr. Ramsey, from what you just described is what us Southerners call an ass whooping. So what like you're saying is you got your ass whooped by 11-year-old blonde, and I was like, well, yeah. I mean, heck, I'm not even 18 years old yet. That means I could whoop your butt from here to Tip Top Poultry with one hand tied behind my back. Because I'm standing right there at the corner of Wilco Drive and trying to think of the name of it, right over there by Tip Top Poultry, close to the Big Chicken in Marietta.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't even 18 years old yet. You know,
Showing
Eric
everybody
Kessler
this
always
is
said it
Levi.
didn't matter if I was 17, I'd have ripped him a new butthole. And him 39, 40 years old.
Can everybody see the screen where it says Levi, Dilly, and Frady?
Mm-hmm.
And then it says Levi was riding his bike home but never made it. He was found shot to death. He was inducted on October 22nd, 1997, and found on October 23rd, 1997. He has a twin sister, Lacey Frady, thanks to Brittany Sweatman Rogers.
What
Talking
was
about
that last
picture.
name? Did you say
Thanks to
Russ?
Brittany Sweatman Rogers for additional information.
Wow.
Do you
I
know
got a
Brittany?
Rogers to contact because, see, Levi wasn't abducted while riding his bicycle. Levi was abducted off his bicycle in the carport at his mother's house
Yeah, they
by
wanted to
his
lie
dad.
about it,
Well,
and they went back and moved his bicycle back to another location too, right? They kind of put it like right.
yeah. When Milton and them took him, he didn't want to go with his daddy.
But write down that
Um,
name right there, okay? Brittany Sweatman Rogers. See it right here?
mm, yeah, see, they don't want his murder solved. And because they solved his murder, well, um, government will come after all that money that his daddy's got left over and gave his twin sister Lacey. All
Right.
that $40,000 inheritance he received 10 days after his son's murder.
Yeah, he was mad because his son had a friend that was with a black race, right?
Well, his buddy down the street was Hispanic.
No, Hispanic. Okay.
Some
I
of
just
the
knew it.
some of the boys at school he invited to his church to listen to him play the piano. They were
Uh-huh.
they were black or African descent, we call it.
Yeah.
So Levi wasn't a white supremacist or white separatist. Levi was Levi. Levi could get along with anybody. Whether they were red, pink, or purple, or whatever you want to say. He was devoted to his church, playing the piano, would have his friends from school come and listen to him sing at church. You know, he was the total opposite of his daddy. And his dad, I've spoken to a lot of people that know Milton, and said his son would not live to see one penny of that inheritance he was going to get. It was $40 million. And Milton took some of that money to build the truck bomb number 14 that was destined for the FBI field office in Mobile, Alabama, the morning of January 29th, 1998, because they were going to attack and kill 350 federal agents. Well, Ron Vincent of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation out of the Cleveland, Georgia office was the chief investigator for Georgia over the Centennial Park attack. He also lived less than a mile from my brother Fred over in Suches, Georgia. They're just off of Highway 180 and 60. So Ron was actually the agent from the government who helped me stop the truck bombing of the FBI field office in Mobile, Alabama. And of course, after my appointment that afternoon as governor of the state of North Carolina, I had to ride back over to Suches and I had to meet with Ron and the assistant director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And of course, we discussed Levi's murder.
Right.
So the GBI knows that that my brother and Eric Rudolph and Milton Frady and that bunch, they're the ones who murdered Levi Frady. They know it. The feds know it. It's just like the feds know who murdered John Bonet just as much as I know who murdered John Bonet. They know who set out the explosives in Centennial Park while Eric
There's your answers,
was up
y'all. Y'all
partying
wonder.
with his brother Daniel Rudolph and Hanging Dog.
There's your answer. There's your answer, y'all. It's a yes, they have been told.
So they do know. So I'm not saying anything that they don't already know. This is what the public doesn't know. But I sure appreciate everybody coming on. I hope this helps shed more light to where everyone can understand exactly who the creature of Jekyll Island is, and who all's involved in this. And if you're a Christian, I think I would be praying about support for Israel, since they have the same ideology as the Pharisees. That's what we call them, modern day Pharisees.
Yeah, they like hurting our children.
Yeah, they don't like anyone of the Christian faith whatsoever. Every Christian child that they murder, they see it as a service, to their God, if they even have one. A lot of them are atheists. They sure do not believe in, the God of Israel, the God of the Torah. They believe in the God of the Talmud.
Yeah, this and
So
that my ex stepmom, she believed in satanic, Baal,
yeah,
like Epstein.
yeah. I mean, when you got Frank Sheldon, faked his death July the 9th, 1996, out there in New Amsterdam while he was on flight with Andrea Strassmeyer and Dave Holloway of the CIA. When you got him buried in Western North Carolina since September the 25th of 1999, and you got Andrea Strassmeyer and Dave Holloway buried in Elohim City in Oklahoma, when they were all killed at the same place at the same time, that should tell you right there. The government and the mainstream media knows a whole lot more than what they're making out.
Yeah, they're trying
When you turn on television programs like Nancy Grace, and the way she puts on a little hoop and a row about these various murder cases, Jeff Epstein, Nancy Grace knew Jeff Epstein. He was friends with John and Patsy Ramsey, Zell Miller.
You tried to talk her into doing something about prosecuting some of these people. And what was her answer to that?
No, I offered her an opportunity to interview me. That also had information on the Atlanta child murders. And she advised me that some of her friends were involved in the Atlanta child murders, so why would she want to interview me anyway? So
right. So by doing that, so she's involved with Atlanta child murders, so she's siding with the Atlanta child murders,
Well, yeah, and Atlanta's they say the hub of the South. Heck, it's the capital of child sex trafficking in the United States. Washington D.C. is second. Oakland, California is third. Atlanta is the hot spot for child sex trafficking. It has been, and it will be until these people are rounded up.
Yes, we really need to do some things to. Come on, government. Come on, everybody sticking together and make sure that we stand up for our children, please.
Yeah. Well, if there's no other reason in the world worth standing up for, I don't know what is. But they're the commodity. They're They're worth more than gold, silver, and oil in these people's book, and they pay high dollar, just like that former CIA agent just previously stated, for where they torture these children for their adrenaline.
Uh-huh.
And you know what we revealed about that 2 years ago. So they're coming out with this. I put this information out. It might be
Good.
2 months. It comes out. It might be 6 months. It might be a year more if it comes out. But it's coming out now.
I
Yeah.
used to have the documentation that somebody has sent me online, but I cannot find it. It must have been on an old computer or something. But it
Mhm.
showed, some of the list of the names of the children and showed how much adrenochrome that they had left. And then if they did not have enough for their adrenochrome, then they were in the hunt parties where they were going to kill the kid, because they were no
Well, yeah,
use
they do.
for it.
You know, they'll torture these children. They'll chase them in the woods, make them think they're about to escape, and they'll have them. I
Uh-huh.
mean, they got so many ways of doing it. They're masters at it. So that's why with the John Benet Ramsey case, they got to focus on the family that lived out there in Boulder, Colorado. Uh, when just about everybody and their brother out in Georgia knows John Ramsey from Lockheed Martin.
And also, they got to think about this because usually after there's a crime scene, no matter what, you don't go and let all these people come in there and start cleaning your house.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different stuff that happened that should not have happened.
Well, it's like I told a waitress last night, she was talking about how her husband bought her a firearm and she was scared of it. And I said, well, you need to get over that fear. Half of the people that was involved in the murder of John Benet Ramsey, half of them are from Marietta, Georgia. So this
All of
is
a sudden,
good.
she's like, "Okay, I think I'm going to not be afraid of 'em. I think I do need my gun. I think I need my
Yeah,
QB
I
now."
think I'd get past my fear of guns after hearing that out of somebody. So I got to check out.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hope everybody have a wonderful day. And look forward to coming on again.
Well, thank you. God bless you.
You too.
Fucking mosquitoes, man.
Y'all have a wonderful day and a better weekend. Rest of what's left. May God continue to bless y'all. Bye for now.